Money has killed more people than wars, diseases, and natural disasters combined, and yet most humans spend their entire lives chasing it without ever understanding what it really is. Money is not something you can touch, taste, smell, or use to survive even a single day in the wild, and yet from the moment humans wake up in the morning to the moment they fall asleep at night, almost every decision they make, where they live, what they eat, who they marry, what they fear, and what they dream about, is quietly shaped by this invisible idea. People leave their homes, cross oceans, abandon families, sacrifice health, destroy friendships, and sometimes even give up their lives, not for survival itself, but for pieces of paper, digital numbers, and symbols that have value only because billions of humans collectively agree that they do. The most dangerous truth about money is not that it is powerful, but that money itself has no power at all, because its entire strength comes from belief, trust, and obedience. And once you understand how that belief was created, shaped, and controlled across history, you stop seeing money as destiny and begin seeing it as a system. Thousands of years ago, long before banks existed, long before salaries, price tags, stock markets, or governments, human life revolved around one brutal truth: survival depended not on wealth, but on cooperation, where small tribes lived close to nature and relied entirely on one another to stay alive. In this world, there was no concept of money, no numbers deciding worth, no abstract symbols defining value, because value itself was physical, immediate, and deeply human. Food meant life, tools meant safety, and skills meant survival. A farmer who harvested more grain than his family could eat exchanged it with a hunter who had meat but no crops, while a craftsman who knew how to shape stone or metal relied on food from others in return for his knowledge, creating a simple system where everything was traded directly, face to face, without intermediaries. But this system worked only because life was simple and communities were small, because every trade depended on a fragile coincidence, the coincidence that both people wanted exactly what the other had at the same moment in time. If a farmer needed tools but the craftsman already had enough food, no trade could happen. If meat spoiled before it could be exchanged, its value vanished completely, and if something could not be divided fairly, conflict followed. As villages slowly grew into towns and towns into early cities, this coincidence-based system began to crack, because human needs are not synchronized, time destroys goods, and a growing civilization cannot rely on negotiation and luck to function. The deeper problem was invisible but fatal. Barter had no memory, it could not store value across time, it could not measure worth consistently, and it could not support complex societies. And the moment humans realized that survival alone was no longer enough, that progress required planning, storage, and trust beyond immediate needs, they began searching for something universal. Something that everyone would accept. Something that could last. Something that could represent value even when survival was not immediately at stake. And that. The first forms of money were not invented by kings, governments, or economists, but by ordinary people who slowly realized that certain objects were trusted by almost everyone, regardless of tribe or region. These objects were not chosen randomly. They were scarce enough to be valuable, useful enough to matter, portable enough to carry, and durable enough to survive time. Cowrie shells, salt, grain, livestock, beads, and metals became early money not because they were magical, but because society collectively agreed that they represented value. In ancient Mesopotamia, one of the world's first complex civilizations, barley and silver were used as units of account, carefully weighed rather than counted, proving that money was already becoming abstract, value measured not by emotion, but by standardization. Across Africa and Asia, cowrie shells traveled thousands of kilometers through trade routes, passing through countless hands, demonstrating a revolutionary idea: money worked not because of force, but because of shared belief. At this stage in history, money was not controlled by rulers. It lived inside culture, tradition, and mutual trust among people who may never meet again. Even language remembers this era, as the Latin word pecus, meaning cattle, became the root of words related to wealth and money, reminding us that prosperity was once measured in living animals rather than numbers on paper. But as populations exploded, kingdoms expanded, and trade stretched across continents, rulers began to see something dangerous and powerful in money. They realized that whoever controlled what people trusted could control the people themselves. And so money began its slow journey away from shared belief and toward power. Gold changed everything. Unlike grain or livestock, gold did not rot, die, or disappear with time. It was rare, beautiful, indestructible, and universally desired, making it the perfect material to store value across generations. Around 600 BCE, in the Kingdom of Lydia, humans took a historic step by stamping gold and silver into standardized coins, marked with royal symbols and faces, transforming money from a shared cultural agreement into a political weapon. For the first time, trusting money meant trusting authority, because every coin now carried a silent message. This value is guaranteed by power. Kings controlled mints, empires controlled gold supplies, and armies marched not just for land or ideology, but for access to precious metals that funded expansion, war, and control. History began to repeat a brutal pattern. Civilizations with gold rose, and civilizations without it fell, not because they were wiser or more moral, but because money decided their fate. But gold, despite its power, carried its own limits. It was heavy, dangerous to transport, easy to steal, and painfully slow for growing economies that demanded speed, scale, and safety. And once again, humanity was forced to do what it always does when a system reaches its limit: invent something new. Something lighter. Something faster. Something built not on metal. For thousands of years, gold and silver ruled the world. But as trade expanded across continents and civilizations grew more complex, metal began to feel less like freedom and more like a burden, because carrying wealth meant carrying weight, risk, and constant fear of theft. Merchants traveling long distances faced a brutal reality. The more successful they became, the more dangerous their journeys grew, as wealth attracted not just opportunity, but violence. It was in ancient China, during the Tang and Song dynasties, that humanity made one of its most revolutionary leaps, not by changing what money represented, but by changing what it looked like. Instead of carrying heavy metal, merchants began depositing gold and silver with trusted institutions and receiving paper receipts in return, simple documents that promised the holder could reclaim real wealth at any time. At first, these papers were nothing more than convenience tools, symbols pointing back to something solid and physical, and they worked because trust was still anchored to reality. Trade accelerated dramatically. Markets expanded. Cities grew. Commerce began flowing faster than ever before in human history, because money was no longer limited by weight or distance. But hidden inside this convenience was a dangerous realization. People were not trading gold anymore, they were trading paper. And slowly, almost invisibly, trust began shifting away from metal and toward the symbol itself. Governments noticed. Rulers noticed. And once they understood that people accepted paper as if it were wealth, the temptation became impossible to resist. States began printing more notes than the gold or silver they actually held, quietly transforming money from a physical guarantee into a promise that depended entirely on belief. As long as people believed the paper could be redeemed, the system survived. But the moment belief broke, everything collapsed. This was the birth of a new kind of power, because for the first time in history, money could be created not by mining, farming, or labor, but by ink, seals, and authority. Trust slowly moved away from individuals and communities and concentrated inside institutions, where rulers decided how much money existed and who received it first. Paper money rewired human psychology. Wealth became lighter, easier to move, and dangerously abstract. Effort and value began drifting apart. And although paper money unlocked massive economic growth, it also planted the seed for inflation, manipulation, and systemic control that would define the modern world. Money was no longer something you could see, weigh, or touch. It had become a story, a promise. And stories, when believed by millions, can reshape civilizations. When banks first appeared, they did not present themselves as creators of money, but as guardians of it, quiet institutions built on the promise of safety, where merchants and citizens could store their gold without fear of theft, fire, or loss. People deposited their wealth and received paper claims in return, believing that their money was simply waiting for them, untouched and unchanged, behind thick walls and iron doors. But bankers noticed something subtle and deeply important. Most depositors never came to withdraw their gold at the same time. The money sat still. And idle money, in the eyes of bankers, was wasted potential. This realization gave birth to one of the most powerful ideas in financial history: fractional reserve banking. Banks discovered that they could keep only a fraction of deposits in reserve and lend out the rest, charging interest on money that technically still belonged to someone else. With every loan issued, new money entered the economy, not mined, not earned, not created through labor, but written into existence through accounting. Money began to multiply itself. At first, this seemed harmless, even beneficial. Loans funded businesses, built homes, expanded cities, and accelerated progress, while interest rewarded those who controlled capital rather than those who produced value. But beneath this growth was a hidden mathematical trap. When banks create money through loans, they create the principal, but not the interest required to repay it. This means that in the system as a whole, there is always more debt than money available to pay it back. Someone must always lose. Someone must always default. Debt became permanent, not temporary. As societies embraced credit, education, housing, healthcare, and even basic survival became tied to borrowing, pulling individuals into obligations that followed them for decades. Governments themselves joined the cycle, borrowing from the same financial institutions that created money from nothing, locking entire nations into interest payments that shaped policies, wars, and futures. Money was no longer just a medium of exchange. It had become a force that dictated behavior. People chose careers not out of passion, but out of repayment schedules. They delayed families, sacrificed health, and accepted unfair systems, not because they believed in them, but because debt left them no choice. Banks did not need armies. They did not need violence. Control was achieved through numbers, contracts, and time. And once debt became normal, escape became unthinkable. Money had been reborn, not as gold or paper, but as obligation. For decades, paper money still pretended to be honest, because even though most people never touched gold, they believed that somewhere, behind the scenes, real value existed to support the system. But in 1971, that illusion officially ended. Facing rising debt, war expenses, and economic pressure, the United States made a decision that quietly changed the fate of global money forever. It removed the dollar from gold backing, breaking the final link between currency and physical reality. From that moment on, money became fiat, valuable not because it represented something scarce or real, but because governments declared it legal tender and demanded that taxes be paid with it. Trust was no longer optional. It was enforced. With no physical limits on creation, money could now be printed at will, expanding supply faster than real goods, real labor, and real resources. At first, the effects felt invisible. Prices rose slowly. Savings lost value quietly. Wages failed to keep pace, while productivity increased and workdays grew longer. Over time, inflation became a silent tax, one that punished savers, rewarded borrowers, and transferred wealth toward those closest to money creation. Asset prices surged. Debt exploded. Inequality widened. Money drifted even further away from reality, becoming an abstract promise backed by nothing but confidence in institutions that could never be allowed to fail. Central banks emerged as the unseen architects of economies, adjusting interest rates and money supply in attempts to stabilize systems that were structurally unstable by design. Booms and busts became normal. Crises became recurring. And each time the system faltered, the solution was always the same: create more money. But printing money does not create resources. It redistributes power. Those who understood the system learned how to protect themselves. Those who did not felt poorer every year without knowing why. Money had completed its transformation, from a tool of exchange into a mechanism of control based entirely on belief. And belief, once centralized, becomes fragile. As money entered the digital world, it lost its final connection to the physical senses, because for the first time in history, value no longer needed to be seen, touched, or even consciously acknowledged to be spent. What once required effort, counting cash, handing it over, feeling its absence, was replaced by a tap, a swipe, or a click, making spending effortless and loss almost painless. This convenience changed human behavior at a level deeper than economics. When money became invisible, debt stopped feeling dangerous. Spending stopped feeling real. Saving began to feel unnecessary. Every transaction became a number on a screen, detached from labor, time, and effort, allowing people to consume more while understanding less. Behind this frictionless experience, something else quietly emerged. Every purchase was recorded. Every habit was analyzed. Every pattern was stored. Money was no longer just a medium of exchange, it became a data stream, revealing where people went, what they valued, what they feared, and how they could be influenced. Control no longer required force. It required design. Algorithms nudged behavior. Credit scores judged character. Access replaced ownership. A person could be financially alive or dead without ever touching a banknote. Convenience delivered speed and comfort, but it also rewired psychology, as people began trusting screens more than reality and systems more than intuition. The weight of money disappeared, but its influence deepened. And as society celebrated cashless efficiency, few noticed how easily access could be limited, reversed, or removed entirely. Money had become invisible. And invisible systems are the hardest to resist. In 2008, when the global financial system collapsed under the weight of its own contradictions, millions of people around the world watched banks fail, savings vanish, and governments rescue the very institutions that caused the damage. Trust shattered. Not just in banks, but in the idea that the system was fair, stable, or designed to protect ordinary people. Out of this moment of chaos emerged a proposal so radical that it sounded impossible, a form of money that did not require trust in any government, bank, or authority. Bitcoin was introduced as open source code, not as a company, not as a nation, and not as a promise, but as a protocol, a set of rules enforced by mathematics rather than humans. For the first time in history, money could exist without a central issuer. No ruler could print more. No institution could change the rules. No permission was required to participate. Instead of trust being placed in people, it was placed in transparency, cryptography, and a decentralized network where anyone could verify the truth for themselves. Bitcoin introduced absolute scarcity into the digital world, a fixed supply that could not be altered, regardless of demand, politics, or crisis. This was not just a technical innovation. It was a philosophical challenge. If money could exist without masters, then control over money was not a law of nature, but a choice humanity had made and could unmake. But Bitcoin was not perfect. Its price was volatile. Its technology complex. Its adoption slow and uneven. And it did not promise equality or salvation. What it offered instead was something more dangerous, an alternative. A proof that money did not have to be created through debt, enforced by authority, or manipulated behind closed doors. For supporters, Bitcoin represented freedom from centralized control. For critics, it threatened stability, regulation, and power. The debate was not really about technology. It was about who should control trust in a digital world. And once that question was asked, it could never be taken back. The future of money is arriving quietly, not with explosions or announcements, but through software updates, policy changes, and systems designed to feel convenient rather than powerful. Digital currencies promise speed, efficiency, and control, allowing governments to move money instantly, reduce fraud, and manage economies with unprecedented precision. But every increase in efficiency comes with a cost. When money becomes programmable, it can be limited, delayed, redirected, or denied. When every transaction is tracked, privacy becomes optional. When access replaces ownership, freedom becomes conditional. Societies now stand at a crossroads, facing a choice that previous generations never had to confront so directly: whether money should serve humans, or humans should adapt themselves to money. Centralized systems offer stability, predictability, and protection from chaos, but demand obedience and trust in institutions that grow more complex and distant with time. Decentralized systems offer independence, transparency, and resistance to control, but demand responsibility, understanding, and personal risk. There is no perfect answer, only trade-offs. The real battle over money is not between cash and digital, or fiat and crypto. It is between convenience and freedom, security and privacy, control and autonomy. And that battle will not be decided by technology alone, but by what people are willing to understand, question, and defend. Money began as a simple tool to help humans cooperate and survive, evolved into a symbol of trust, transformed into an instrument of power, and now stands on the edge of becoming a system that may know more about us than we know about ourselves. It has never been neutral. It has always reflected who holds control. Money rules only those who never learn how it works. Understanding it does not guarantee freedom, but without understanding, freedom is impossible. Now you have seen the full journey, from barter to belief, from metal to math, from survival to systems. The future of money is not written. It is being decided, right now. And the question is no longer what money is. The question is what kind of world we are willing to build